Mike Gonzalez is a senior fellow at the renowned Heritage Foundation, and he, along with another heritage scholar, a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Butcher, wrote a piece entitled Critical Race Theory, The New Intolerance and Its Grip on America. It is absolutely eye-opening, it's chilling, and it is absolutely paramount that every person who loves liberty and freedom read this. Mike, I thank you so much for the gift of your time. I know how busy you are there at Heritage, and the piece is absolutely superb. You cannot talk about critical race theory, as you point out in the piece, without starting by talking about critical theory. Can you give us the background on this? How did critical theory start, and who were the primary proponents?
Sure. First of all, Janet, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It is I who thanks you for this. Critical race theory is the child of critical legal theory, which is the child of critical theory. Critical theory is the product of the Frankfurt School, which is a school based in Frankfurt, Germany at the time, in 1937. By that time, they were at Columbia University because they had escaped. But in 1937, the director of the Frankfurt School wrote a paper titled Traditional and Critical Theory, in which he expounded what critical theory would be. And it was really Marxist in origin. It was not only an origin, it was a Marxist attempt at destroying all the norms of society through criticism, criticizing all the traditions, all the institutions, in order to tear them down and replace them with something new, right? It was an attempt at wholesale change. So it put the West and then American society through ceaseless criticism in order to make the institutions weak and replace them. And then the addition, like we can talk if you want about critical legal theory, but the addition of critical race theory is to do that by seeing everything through the context, the prism of race.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let me linger so that my friends can understand why race is just sort of a late insertion. If they understand the primary principles in critical theory, they're going to begin to understand why this is a particularly pernicious ideology. So you talk about Marx being involved in this. Hegel is involved in this. This is socialism extraordinaire. This is the eradication of the individual. This is the delineation out of different people groups. So this was an idea that they probably thought was going to be useful in some way, shape, or form. So for the original proponents, like Marx himself, out of critical theory, what would they have wanted the desired outcome to be?
Well, Marx himself had died a long time before, and Hegel had too, and Nietzsche had too, before the Frankfurt School was created in the 1920s. But Marx saw everything as a struggle between the oppressed and their oppressors, right?
Mm-hmm,
He expressed them in economic terms. The working class was oppressed by the bourgeoisie, the owners of capital, the capitalists, and they needed to revolt and overthrow them and set up world communism. So if you really want me to get into this, a communist thinker by the name of Antonio Gramsci comes along in the 1920s, and he observes that there have been very few revolutions, right? By that time, there had only been one revolution in Russia, which was really kind of a backward place in Europe. And they thought, but Marx and his co-writer Engels had promised there would be constant revolts by the working class. What is going on? And then Antonio Gramsci comes out with his theory of cultural hegemony, which states plainly that the worker had adopted the views of their oppressors. In other words, the worker liked the family, which he calls the patriarchal family, liked the economic system, capitalism, liked religion, liked God, liked these things, and the bourgeois no longer needed to use violence to oppress the worker. The worker was oppressing himself. Then the addition of critical theory by the Frankfurt School in the 1930s was a way to tear down that hegemonic narrative of the oppressor, to tear down God, to tear down the family, to tear down the economic system, and replace him with other things.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many points on this, Mike. One is the fact that some of the proponents believe that truth was unknowable. As a Christian, I have a problem with that right out of the gate. The other thing, too, is when you move from critical theory to critical legal theory, before we get to critical race theory, Critical legal theory basically felt that favoritism was given to those who drafted the laws. I would argue that protection was their primary concern. That's what the law does. But second of all, that the law is really very flimsy and really can be replaced at the whim and whimsy of the people who believe in this critical legal theory. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, right. So you and I believe that that the state exists to protect our freedoms. The state does not exist to give us free stuff. The state exists to protect our freedom.
Yes.
They believe that the state existed to protect the rich, this is pretty standard communist belief, right? That the people who wrote those laws to protect themselves and their property. That is a very warped view of what has taken place. You know, the founders themselves risked everything. They risked everything as they themselves recognized. They risked their lives and property in order to be free and to have self-rule. But what critical legal theory says is that all the laws and structures are just a way to keep the oppressors in their privileged status and to keep the oppressed underneath. And that emerges in the 1970s, and it's the direct result of critical theory. The proponents of critical legal theory are very forthcoming. Not just the title shows that it is, but they say, no, look, we are a debt to critical theory, to the Frankfurt School, but also they mention the postmodernists, which was a group of thinkers in Paris, also Marxists, or close to Marxists, who also believed that absolute truth was impossible, that everything was relative, that actually a sentence that you could be interpreting what I'm saying right now, Janet, in any way you liked.
Yeah,
I could be talking about making muffins right now, and that is a valid approach.
Wow. All right. So just in deference to time, and by the way, the report is exquisite. If you were in my classroom, it would be required reading. It really does a fabulous job of not only giving you the history, but how the tendril outreaches of this critical race theory concept is working its way in institutions all around us. So now let me move to critical race theory. So it goes from critical theory to critical legal theory to critical race theory. How did it metamorphosize, if you will, from critical legal theory to critical race theory?
In critical race theory, which then emerges in the 70s and 80s, and by the way, I've written a book on all this that was published in July by Encounter Books. My book is called The Plot to Change America, How Identity Politics is Dividing the Land of the Free. And my book deals with how critical race theory really underpins identity politics being the division of reimagining America as being a confederation of categories, right? Hispanics, African Americans, Asian Americans, LGBTQIA, categories of the oppressed. But critical race theory, what it does is it takes everything you and I have been discussing till now and says everything should be seen through the prism of race. When I get up and turn on my TV, race is involved in that. Everything, the conversation that I have with my wife, everything is seen through the proper of race. Race is at the center of everything in America.